Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Maybe that's why the strongest people are also the ones who quietly fall apart. Not because they're weak, but because waking up costs something. You ever notice how the strongest people, the ones everyone leans on, are often the ones falling apart behind the scenes? It's strange, right? They've got that calm, steady energy. They're reliable, always there for others. They don't complain, don't fall apart, at least not where anyone can see it. But sometimes, you look a little closer and something feels off. Like behind all that strength, there's something unraveling. And maybe you felt it too. That weird pressure to always be okay, to keep it together no matter what. People call you strong, and maybe they mean it as a compliment. But sometimes it doesn't feel like one. Sometimes it feels like a box you got shoved into. And once you're in, you can't get out, even when you're barely hanging on. Let's be real. There's a different kind of pain that lives inside strong people. A quiet kind. The kind that doesn't scream. It just sinks. Heavy. Silent. Deep. And yeah, this hit me more than I expected. It's not just about being tired. Not just about feeling overworked or overstretched. That's part of it, but not all of it. What we're talking about here is something deeper. Something that gets into your bones. Carl Jung, you've probably heard the name, had a way of explaining this kind of inner conflict that honestly makes too much sense. He wasn't just some old-school psychologist scribbling notes in a lab coat. He saw the human mind like a whole landscape, full of hidden rooms and secret doors. And when it comes to strong people feeling broken, his ideas shine a light right into the center of it. There are three concepts we're going to explore: the persona, the shadow, and individuation. The persona is the mask we wear, the version of ourselves we present to the world to keep things running smoothly. For strong people, that mask is competence, strength, control. And over time, it becomes a performance so convincing that even we start to believe it. But here's the problem. Everything that doesn't fit into that mask, fear, softness, vulnerability, gets pushed out of sight. And that's where the shadow comes in. The shadow is all the stuff we hide. Not because we're bad people, but because we think those parts of us aren't allowed to exist. And when the shadow builds up without being acknowledged, that's when things start to crack. And that's where burnout really begins. Not just physical exhaustion, but a kind of emotional implosion. Like part of you is tired of pretending, but you don't know how to stop. So that's what we're digging into. Not in a dry, textbook kind of way. This is going to be honest, real. Maybe uncomfortable at times, but also freeing, because if you've ever felt broken and couldn't explain why, if you've ever been the strong one and still felt like you were falling apart, there's a reason, and it might be the most human thing about you. So let's start with the mask. Carl Jung called it the persona, the version of yourself you put on like a uniform to face the world. It's not fake, it's not a lie. It's strategic, necessary even. You've got a job, you wear a professional mask. With family, maybe you play the responsible one. With friends, you might be the funny one, the chill one, the one who's always good. And if you're the strong one, that mask looks like this. You're steady, you're capable, you don't complain, you get things done. You don't fall apart, even when it hurts. That mask gets praised, right? You're so strong, I don't know how you do it, you always hold it together. But here's the thing. After a while, you don't just wear the mask. You become it. You start believing that being strong is the only version of you that's allowed to exist. And that's where it starts to get heavy. Because life doesn't care about your mask. Stuff still hits you. You still feel things. You still get tired, sad, angry, afraid. But none of that fits the mask. So where does it go? Exactly. You push it down. You push it down because people need you. Because you've got things to do. Because it's just not the right time to fall apart. And maybe, deep down, because you're scared that if you do let go, you won't be able to pull yourself back together. Let me ask you this. Have you ever had a moment where someone finally asked how you're doing and you almost broke down just from hearing the question? That's not weakness. That's the pressure of the persona cracking a little. See, the persona isn't just a social role. It's armor, and the longer you wear it, the more disconnected you get from what's really going on inside. The more you play the role of the strong one, the less space you have to be anything else. You don't rest. You don't ask for help. You apologize when you do cry. You downplay your own needs, like they're some kind of luxury. And the scary part? People start treating you like the mask is the real you. They stop checking in. They assume you're fine, because that's what you always show. So what happens when you aren't fine? When you're burning out and no one sees it? When you're crumbling inside but still smiling on the outside? That's when the cracks really start to show. Not always in big dramatic ways. Sometimes it's snapping at someone over nothing, or zoning out, or losing motivation, feeling numb. But inside, you know something's off, something's wrong. But you've worn the mask so long, you're not even sure who you'd be without it. And look, I get it. Taking off that mask feels risky. Exposing the softer stuff underneath, that feels vulnerable. Maybe even weak. But let me say this clearly. That softness, that fear, that sadness, that's you too. And ignoring it doesn't make it go away, it just pushes it deeper. That's where Jung's next concept comes in, the shadow. Because everything we hide behind the persona, every emotion we reject, every need we silence, it doesn't disappear. It just gets buried. And buried things don't stay buried forever. In the next section we're going there, into the shadow, into the hidden weight behind the mask. But before we do, just ask yourself this. What's your mask? And what part of you has it been hiding? So what exactly is hiding underneath that mask? Because the persona, that polished version of strength we just talked about, it comes at a price. And most people don't notice it until it's too late. They're too good at playing the part, too good at pretending it doesn't hurt. But here's the truth. Every time you bite your tongue, swallow your feelings, and smile through something that actually hurt you, you're pushing that weight somewhere. And it doesn't just vanish, it builds. And the stuff we hide, it's not just bad stuff. That's the mistake people make when they hear about suppression. They think it's just about shoving down anger or fear or sadness, but it's deeper than that. You know what else gets buried? The need to rest, the need to be comforted, the right to break down, the right to not have all the answers. Strong people, or at least people who think they have to be strong all the time, they don't just hide their pain, they hide their softness, their gentleness, their need to be held instead of always holding others. And that messes with you. Slowly. Let me give you an example. Let's say someone's always the fixer. Everyone comes to them with problems, and they handle it, no matter what. They've got advice, resources, support, whatever's needed. But the minute they feel overwhelmed, they shut it down. They say, "I'm fine." They keep going, even if they're running on fumes, because somewhere along the line, they learn that their value comes from being useful, not from being human. That's the hidden cost. You don't just suppress feelings, you start suppressing your own humanity. And Carl Jung had a word for where all that stuff goes. It's not gone. It's not erased. It gets stored in what he called the shadow. Now, the shadow isn't evil. It's not your dark side in some villainy kind of way. It's just the parts of yourself that you've disowned. The stuff you've decided, consciously or unconsciously, doesn't belong in your version of strength. But here's the kicker. That part of you doesn't go quietly. It doesn't just stay buried forever. Eventually, it comes back. Usually not in calm, gentle ways. Ever had a random emotional outburst and thought, where the hell did that come from? Ever felt hollow for weeks, even though life seemed fine on the outside? That's the shadow knocking, and it doesn't care about timing, or how many people rely on you. When it wants your attention, it gets it. Because the deeper you bury this stuff, the more energy it takes to keep it down. And eventually, you run out of space, out of energy, out of patience, and it starts to leak. Maybe it shows up as anxiety or irritability, or this creeping numbness that makes everything feel pointless. You ever felt like you're doing everything right but still feel empty? That's not failure. That's feedback. It's your system saying, hey, we've ignored this stuff for too long. And what's wild is that strong people often don't recognize it. Because they've trained themselves so well to dismiss pain, they don't even notice it anymore. Until their body starts breaking down, or their relationships do. Or they wake up one day and realize they don't even know what makes them happy anymore. It's not weakness, it's a signal. And you can ignore a signal for a while, but not forever. This is why Jung believed that confronting the shadow wasn't optional, it was necessary. If you want to live a full, conscious, real life, you've got to stop pretending those hidden parts of you don't exist. Because every part you suppress, it's still there, waiting to be seen, waiting to be understood. And yeah, it's scary, because it means facing stuff you've spent years trying to avoid. But what's scarier? Living your whole life armored up, only to find out the person behind the armor never got to breathe. So here's a quiet question to sit with. What part of yourself have you been taught is too much? Too emotional? Too needy? Too messy? Too soft? Because that's probably the part you buried first. And it might be the exact part of you that needs the most care right now. In the next part, we're going deeper into that idea, into Jung's full concept of the shadow, what it really is, and how it quietly shapes your life even when you're trying to stay strong. But for now, just take a breath. And if something in you feels heavy after hearing this, that's okay. It means you're finally listening. Alright, let's talk about the shadow. We touched on it before, this idea from Carl Jung, that all the parts of you that don't fit get pushed down and hidden. But now we're going to slow it down a bit and really sit with what that actually means. So here's the deal. The shadow isn't evil. It's not some monster living inside you. It's you. Just the parts you've disowned. Think of it like this. Every time you were told, don't cry, or that's not how strong people act, or you need to toughen up, you made a decision, even if you didn't realize it at the time. You tucked something away. You learned what was acceptable, and what wasn't. And everything that didn't make the cut, that's the shadow. It could be anger, or fear, or sadness, but it could also be joy, creativity, even your need for love. Anything you felt was too much, too soft, or not strong enough, yeah, that's in there too. And for strong people, the shadow tends to get packed. Because when your whole identity is built around being capable, composed, and in control, there's no room for mess, no room for chaos, no room for anything that looks like weakness, even if it's just being human. So what happens? You push it down again and again and again, until one's not right but you can't explain it. That's the shadow surfacing. Not to ruin your life, but to try and get seen. Jung had a quote about this, one of his most famous ones actually. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And man, that one hits. Because that's what the shadow does. It operates in the background, influencing your thoughts, your choices, your relationships, without you simmering tension that wrecks their peace. Or maybe someone grew up thinking they always had to be strong and self-reliant, so they buried their need for connection, for comfort, for support. And now as an adult, they feel isolated. But instead of reaching out, they pull back even more, because they've convinced themselves they don't need anyone. That's the shadow too. And the wild thing is, it's not trying to hurt you. It's trying to protect you. It thinks it's helping. But protection without awareness, that's just repression. And repression always has a price. Here's another way to think about it. Imagine carrying a backpack. Every time you hide an emotion, every time you swallow your sadness, silence your fear, shove down your need to cry, you're tossing another rock in that backpack. Now picture doing that for years, decades. That thing gets heavy, and eventually you're gonna feel it in your body, in your sleep, in your relationships, in your ability to feel anything at all. And this is where burnout starts to look a little different. It's not just, I'm tired, it's, I've been carrying too much for too long, and I don't even remember what it feels like to be light. So what do you do with the shadow? You don't fight it. You don't try to fix it. You acknowledge it. You say, yeah, I'm angry, I'm hurt, I feel lost sometimes. Not to fall apart, but to finally be whole. Because here's the hard truth. You can't selectively numb emotions. If you shut down pain, you shut down joy. If you bury your fear, you bury your excitement. You start living a half-life, muted, guarded, flat. And you deserve more than that. Now, shadow work? It's not clean, it's not pretty, it brings up stuff you thought you'd already dealt with. But it also frees you. It gives you yourself back. That's why Jung believed the shadow wasn't something to be feared. It was something to be integrated, something to understand, not suppress. Because integration, not perfection, is the path to peace. So before we move on, let's pause here. Ask yourself, what part of you have you been pretending doesn't exist? What feeling do you shove away so fast you barely let it land? That's the shadow. And it's not your enemy. It's your reflection, just waiting to be seen. In the next part, we'll look at what happens when this internal pressure finally hits the edge, when burnout stops being quiet and becomes a breakdown. Because that's usually when strong people finally start to crack. And surprisingly, that crack might be the beginning of something better. Let's talk about the point when everything starts to crack. Not in some dramatic public collapse. Not always. Sometimes it's subtle, quiet. You just stop feeling like yourself. You're exhausted, but it's not the kind of tired sleep fixes. You've got things to do, but no energy to care. You're not crying, you're not screaming, you're just done. That's burnout. But not just any burnout. This is the kind that creeps in when you've been holding yourself together for too long. When the persona is stretched thin, and the shadow's been knocking on the door for months, maybe years. This isn't just, I need a break. This is something's wrong, and I don't even know what anymore. And here's the part that doesn't get said enough. Burnout isn't weakness. It's a signal. It's your body, your mind, your entire nervous system waving a red flag and saying, hey, we can't keep living like this. Now yeah, we're used to seeing burnout in terms of overwork, long hours, bad bosses, endless deadlines. And that's real. But for strong people, burnout often comes from something deeper. It's not just the workload. It's the emotional labor of pretending you're fine. It's the pressure of always being the one who holds it together. It's carrying everyone else's weight and never setting your own down. You don't ask for help. You don't say, I'm struggling. Because somewhere deep down, maybe you believe you're not allowed to. Maybe you think, if I stop now, everything falls apart. So you keep pushing. You silence your needs. You bury the fatigue. Until one day, your system just says, nope. You stop sleeping, or you sleep all the time. You zone out in conversations. You forget things. You snap at people you love. Or you go totally flat. No joy, no motivation, no spark. It doesn't always look like crisis. Sometimes it looks like nothing. Just a slow, quiet fade. And here's the twist that stings a little. Most strong people wait until this point to finally admit something's wrong. Not because they're in denial, not entirely, but because they've built their entire identity on being the one who doesn't fall apart. So when the crash comes, it's not just painful, it's confusing. They think, this isn't me, I don't break. But here's the truth, you didn't break. You've been breaking for a while. This is just the moment your body stopped letting you ignore it. That's why this part, the burnout, the breakdown, it matters. Because as brutal as it feels, it's also an invitation. A turning point. It's your system asking for something you've been denying. Integration. You can't persona your way out of this. You can't shadowbox your way back to normal. You have to listen. And yeah, it's uncomfortable. Because listening means admitting, I'm not as okay as I thought. I need more than I've been allowing myself. I don't want to carry all of this anymore. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you real. And honestly, a lot of the strongest people out there have no idea how to receive anything. Love, help, care, it all feels foreign. Like they have to earn it first. Or prove they deserve it by showing how much they can take. But the truth is that way of living has an expiration date. You can't run on empty forever. You can't keep pouring from a cup that's cracked and dry. So yeah, burnout hurts. It's scary. It makes you question who you are. But it's also the place where honesty begins. You stop lying to yourself about what you need. You start noticing the parts of you that have been ignored. You begin the slow process of rebuilding, not just your energy, but your sense of self. And let's be clear, this isn't about giving up. It's about giving in to the truth, to the feeling, to the fact that you're not a machine. You're human. And being human means there's a limit to how much you can suppress before something starts to give. And maybe that's what this burnout is. Your system giving you a shot at something more honest, more whole. So if you're in that place, if you're tired in a way that feels deeper than sleep, if you're hollow in a way you can't explain, pause, breathe, and don't rush to fix it. Because the feeling, it's not the end. It's the beginning of something that actually has the power to heal. In the next section, we'll look at what happens when strong people finally face the shadow, what it actually looks like to start doing the real work, and how that discomfort can lead to something lighter, something better. You don't have to stay buried under the weight. You just have to stop pretending it's not there. So what happens when the shadow finally breaks through? When all the stuff you've buried, the pain, the fear, the grief, the stuff you didn't have time or permission to feel, comes up to the surface? Well, first off, it's not fun. It's not peaceful. It's not gentle. It's not some cinematic breakthrough moment with soft music and a perfect monologue. It's messy, confusing, emotional. Sometimes it looks like crying in the middle of the day for no reason. Sometimes it's rage that seems to come out of nowhere. Sometimes it's just going numb, like you've hit a wall and there's nothing left. This is what Jung meant when he talked about the shadow demanding integration. When it's ignored for too long, it doesn't whisper anymore. It shouts, and it doesn't care about timing. It doesn't care how busy you are, or how many people count on you. It just wants to be seen. For strong people, this part is brutal, because your whole identity is wrapped up in control, in steadiness, in being the rock. So when things start slipping, even a little, it feels like you're falling apart. But here's the thing, you're not broken, you're just feeling again. And for people who've been suppressing things for years, that alone can feel like a breakdown. You might think, this isn't me, I don't get like this. But maybe this is you. The real you, under the armor. The part you've never let breathe. And it's okay to be scared of that. It's okay to not know what to do with it at first. Because when the shadow comes up, it brings more than just feelings. It brings questions. Why am I so angry all the time? Why do I feel like I'm not enough, no matter what I do? Why am I still carrying pain from something that happened years ago? These are not easy questions, but they're honest, and they're necessary. This is where the healing starts. Not with fixing, not with running away, but with sitting in it, feeling what you've avoided, letting the shadow have a voice. It's not about indulging your worst impulses. It's not about turning into someone unrecognizable. It's about recognizing what's been hiding behind your performance of strength and deciding to stop hiding from it. Because here's something people don't talk about enough. There are good things in the shadow too. It's not just fear and shame and anger. It's creativity, joy, playfulness. It's your capacity for softness, for vulnerability, for being loved without earning it. You might have shoved all that down because it didn't fit the image. Because being strong meant being invulnerable. But the cost of that? You started living a smaller version of yourself. When the shadow surfaces, it doesn't just bring the pain, it brings the possibility of wholeness. But getting there means you have to feel first. And that's the part strong people struggle with the most. Because feeling feels like failure, like losing control, like weakness. But it's not. It's actually one of the bravest things you can do. To sit with your sadness, to let your anger breathe without destroying something. To finally admit, I'm not okay, and that's okay. That's strength, real strength, not the kind that pretends, the kind that tells the truth. And yeah, it hurts. This part of the process, it will shake you. It'll make you question everything you thought made you strong. You'll feel raw, exposed, and at times completely lost. But that's not the end. That's the beginning of something deeper. Something Jung called individuation. The process of becoming your whole self. Not just the mask. Not just the parts you show to the world. But all of you, shadow included. We're going to get into that next. But for now, just know this. If you're feeling things you've been trying not to feel, you're not going backward. You're going inward. If your emotions feel louder, messier, scarier, it's not because you're broken. It's because you're finally listening. And that voice inside, the one that says, I'm tired, or I need help, or even just I'm not okay, that voice is sacred. That voice is the first step toward healing. So yeah, when the shadow surfaces, it's chaotic, but it's also honest. And honesty is where real strength begins. In the next part, we'll explore what comes after the chaos. How integrating the shadow leads to something more grounded, more peaceful, and more real. Because this isn't just about surviving the crash. It's about becoming someone who doesn't have to crash in the first place. So after the breakdown, after the burnout, after the shadow rises, and everything you've been holding back finally hits the surface, what now? What's the point of all that pain? Carl Jung had a name for what comes next. He called it individuation. Now, I know it sounds clinical, like some textbook psychology term, but what it really means, it's powerful. Individuation is the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not fixed, whole. It's when all the parts of you, the ones you've shown, the ones you've hidden, the ones you're just now discovering, finally start sitting at the same table, talking to each other, working with each other instead of against. See, most of us live fragmented, split between who we are and who we think we're supposed to be. And for strong people, that gap is even wider. You become the persona, calm, capable, collected, and you over-identify with it. You start thinking that's all you are. But individuation says, there's more. There's the you that's scared, the you that's messy, the you that doesn't want to be strong today. And all of that, it belongs. Not because it's pretty, not because it's easy to manage, but because it's real, and real is what heals. Individuation isn't a one-time breakthrough. It's a process. Slow, personal, often uncomfortable. It's looking in the mirror and seeing everything, not just what you want to see. It's realizing I'm not just the strong one, I'm also tired. I'm not just dependable, I'm also afraid of being abandoned. I'm not just the helper, I also want to be held. And you don't push those realizations away. You welcome them. You learn how to hold your strength and your softness in the same hand. You don't choose between control and vulnerability. You make space for both. Because real strength doesn't mean pretending the shadow doesn't exist. Real strength means looking it in the eye and saying, I see you, I know you, you're part of me now. And that part, that's when the healing actually sticks. When you stop chasing some perfect image of who you think you need to be, and start living as the full, messy, deeply human version of yourself. You stop asking, how do I get back to who I was before the burnout? And instead ask, what would it look like to move forward as someone more complete? It changes how you show up in your life. You start noticing when the persona kicks in, when you default to I'm fine, even when you're not. You start catching the little ways you hide, deflecting, avoiding, pushing your needs down. And instead of shaming yourself for it, you pause, you breathe, you get curious, and yeah, this takes work. It takes unlearning. It takes sitting with emotions instead of outrunning them. But over time, you get lighter. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop fighting yourself. You start allowing the full range of your experience to exist. You stop seeing your sadness as a problem to solve. You stop seeing your anger as something to fear. You stop seeing your need for help as a failure. Instead, you just let it be part of your truth, and you honor that truth. That's individuation. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about finally becoming who you actually are. Underneath the mask, beyond the burnout, behind the strength. It's a return to the self that was always there, just waiting for permission to be whole. So if you're in that place right now, where the pain is loud, and everything feels cracked open, just know this is part of the process. You're not losing control. You're losing the version of yourself that was never sustainable in the first place. And what you're building in its place, that's the real you. All of you. In the last part, we'll talk about where this all leads. How strong can look different from now on. Softer, yes, but also clearer, more grounded, more honest. Because real strength isn't about holding it all in, it's about holding yourself exactly as you are, and finally letting that be enough. So now we're here. At the end, but also kind of the beginning. Because once you've seen what's really going on underneath, the persona, the shadow, the burnout, the breakdown, the slow rebuilding, you can't unsee it. You shouldn't unsee it. And honestly, that's a good thing. Because now you get to ask a better question. Not, how do I keep being strong? But, what if strength could mean something else? What if strength wasn't about holding it all together 24/7? What if it wasn't about pushing through pain like it's nothing? What if it didn't mean being the one who never asks for help? What if strength meant being honest about your limits? Letting yourself rest, letting yourself feel, letting other people show up for you. What if the strongest thing you could do was stop pretending? Think about that. Think about how much pressure would lift if you didn't have to be the rock all the time. If you could just say, hey, I'm not okay right now, and not feel ashamed. If you could cry and not apologize for it. If you could let your softness be part of your strength instead of something you hide. That's the shift. And yeah, it's vulnerable. It's unfamiliar. Especially if you've built your whole life around being unshakable. But you know what's even harder? Living in pieces. Living as a mask. As a performance. Living disconnected from what you really feel. What you really need. Who you really are. Carl Jung didn't think we become whole by being perfect. He said we become whole by making peace with our shadow. By bringing the unconscious into the light. That's what this is. This is you. Walking toward the parts of yourself you used to run from. This is you saying, I'm not broken. I've just been carrying more than anyone knew. This is you finally giving yourself permission to be real. Because yeah, strong people feel broken inside. But maybe they're not broken. Maybe they've just never had space to fall apart. And maybe, just maybe, falling apart isn't the end of them. Maybe it's where they finally begin. So take this with you. Strength isn't just resilience. It's not just surviving the worst and pretending it didn't hurt. Strength is integration. It's standing in the truth of all that you are. The light, the shadow, the mess, the beauty, and not flinching. And if that's where you are right now, standing there in that in-between space, feeling like you're unraveling, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not weak. You're waking up. You're coming home to yourself. And that's the strongest thing you'll ever do. If this spoke to you, if it cracked something open or just made you feel seen, don't keep that to yourself. Drop a comment below. Tell me what part hit you hardest, what you've been carrying, what you've never said out loud. Because chances are, someone else is feeling the same and needs to know they're not alone. And if you know someone who's always been the strong one, share this with them. It might say what they haven't been able to. If you're into content that cuts through the noise and gets real about what it means to be human, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're just getting started. You don't have to keep holding everything in. Not here. Not anymore.